Hiya. Today I'm going to read a book. It's about clouds, which there are so many different clouds, and I thought I don't know all of them, so let's read it. I was thinking that way, but I've seen a foreword, which I've seen so many of them because I'm reading so much, but this foreword is totally just, let's say, haunted me. I like that so much, so I'm going to read it. I'm going to share with you, and then if you want, just get this book. I don't know, I'm not being advertised or anything. I just like that so much. That's why I wanted to read it. And also, when I'm reading something, I'm going to also check my mistakes on pronunciations and so many other things. So that's why I decided to read it. Okay, let's start. Foreword. The Service of Clouds, Art, Science and the Sky by Richard Hambly. When the British painter Joseph Wright of Derby climbed Mount Vesuvius during their visit to Naples in 1774, he said that he wished he could have made the ascent in the company of a geologist, since his thoughts would have centered in the bowels of the mountain. Mine skimmed over the surface only. There was a very considerable eruption at the time, of which I am going to make a picture. An erupting volcano was nothing new in late 18th century art, but what was new was Wright's acknowledgement of his scientific limitations, the artistic implications of which were clear. If witnessing a natural spectacle was one thing, but trying to understand it was another, wouldn't knowing the science of what one was seen make one a better artist? This was a profound and troubling question, thus perception depend on understanding, and over the course of the next half-century, amid the continued rise of Enlightenment natural philosophy, it became the question that every serious landscape painter found themselves working to answer. Artists had, of course, depicted land, sea, and sky for centuries, with varying degrees of success. By the 17th century, painting treatises offer detailed instructions for sketching trees and clouds, encouraging artists to get out into nature and paint in the open air. The Dutch marine painter Wilhelm van der Velde the Younger made a series of plain air cloud sketches on Hampstead Heath during his time in London in the 1680s. A process which he called going to skying, while later treatises, such as Alexander Cousin's New Method of Assisting the Invention in Drawing the Original Compositions of Landscape, 1785, offered graduate visual classifications of skyscape states, from all plain to all cloudy, via every shade of cloudiness in between. But none of this guidance required a painter to know anything about the mechanics of what they were painting. And for most of art history, the sky was viewed as little more than a moving canvas to be copied. But that was set to change, and by the time the critic and artist Josh Ruskin declared in 1844 that every class of rock, earth, and cloud must be known by the painter with geologic and meteorologic accuracy. The practice of landscape painting had undergone a transformation into something akin to natural history fieldwork. This transformation was exemplified by John Constable's remarkable claim made during a lecture in 1836 that painting is a science and should be pursued as an inquiry into the laws of nature. Why then may not a landscape painting to be considered a branch of natural philosophy, of which pictures are but the experiments? Constable's alignment of painting natural philosophy arose in the context of large-scale cultural changes that had led to the emergence of science and technology as the economic and intellectual driving forces of much of the Western world. The rapid professionalization of the sciences beginning in the late 18th century saw an array of specialist scientific bodies established over the course of a couple of decades, including in London alone. The Linnean Society, founded in 1788 for the study of botany and taxonomy. The Geological Society, 1807. The Astronomical Society, 1820, and the Meteorological Society, 1823, of which Ruskin was an earlier member. In fact, one of his first publications, Remarks on the Present State of Meteorological Science, appeared in the inaugural volume of the Society's Transactions in 1839, when Ruskin was just 20 years old. In that time, when I read that, well, actually, I was also writing my book, which I'm going to tell you about so much. But in that time, when my main characters were going to watch stargaze, they were climbing mountains, a couple of them. And in that time, I was just thinking about that. What can happen? So how can I write this much better? I'm always writing, by the way. I'm always thinking, okay, I did write something, that's okay, which I wanted to do that, but how can I make it better and better all the time? So in that time, I just got this book for clouds, which is another part of my book. But somehow, I've seen a painter is just climbing a mountain and seeing the view. And in times, I might say, it's not some consequences. It's just much more than that. And also, one of my chapters in my book, I'm talking about the constables. So actually, I think you all know that painting, the highway. I like that. And I was writing about that. So I seen it. And I said it's just more than coincidence. By the way, there is also, when we talk about the Joseph Wright of Derby, his paintings, I'm going to show you. I think it's amazing. This one. This volcanic eruption, he painted. I think that's amazing. I don't know where is that picture. A painting. I would like to see it, but it probably is a private collection. Anyway, so, and after that, that is amazing cloud. You see, this one is happening, and then one more. Where is it? That one. Well, actually, this one is different because looking across the Hudson Valley, New York, by Frederick Edwin Church, which is this one. It's a bit different because it's not actually showing the lands. It's more like painting the clouds, which in my opinion I think is so hard to paint in the clouds, because it's okay, maybe the blue sky and also clouds, maybe you can do that better, but time to time when the air was grey, when air is grey, when it's just all cloudy day and it's not bright even, it must be hard. I don't know, I'm not a painter, but it must be hard to do that. Anyway, let's continue, shall we? So when Constable ventured onto Hampstead Heath in the early 1820s with the aim of painting clouds in situ, it may have been under the same grey skies as his Dutch predecessor, Van der Weyden the Younger, but it was in a wholly different conceptual world. He took with him a copy of Thomas Forster's research about atmospheric phenomena, 1815, the first chapter of which offered an illustrated summary of Luke Howard's recent classification and nomenclature of clouds. Howard, like many of his scientific contemporaries, was an accomplished draftsman, and his landmark essay on the modifications of clouds, 1803, as did Forster's latest summary, featured engravings of his own watercolor studies of the 7 cloud types that he had identified and named: Cirrus, Cumulus, Stratus, and their compounds. Constable's penciled and annotations to Forster's textbook confirm his up-to-date knowledge of clouds and weather, as do the detailed weather notes that he added to more than 100 oil on paper cloud sketches he completed between 1820 and 1822, which are now among his most celebrated works. Well, I don't know, when people are just doing something, whether it's Swankin is going to be so much famous and everyone's going to know about it. I'm always curious. Constable was not the first Romantic era artist to engage with Luke Harwood's nephological insights. When a German translation of Harwood's Cloud essay was read by the polymath J.W. von Goethe, he sent copies to several artists of his acquaintance, advising them to study it before going to the sketch in the open air. For the Dresden-based painter Carl Gustav Kerres, the advice proved revelatory. As soon as he read Harwood's essay, he wrote he felt that the problem of how to reconcile scientific analysis with creative freedom had now been solved, since clouds, according to Harwood's new system, had become explicable while remaining free to go about their ceaseless transformations. His response was widely shared in a generation of predominantly Northern European landscape painters, included the Danish J.W. Exelberg, the Danish-Norwegian Johan Christian Dahl, his compatriot Nod Bade, and the Dutchman Anton Pitlu, were won over to this new way of thinking about the sky and its place in art. One thing I'm really curious, why we are talking about a person, a famous person, which that person doesn't matter doing whatever they're doing, like a writer, a painter, and so many other things. But what are we saying their names with, where they're coming from? Is it really a big thing, or is it just important when they are doing their jobs about their culture or about their, let's say, the place where they're coming from, their country? If they are not only focusing on one specific thing, which that about their countries, why we are talking about them with their countries? I really don't understand. Which, when you say Danish Norwegian, so we don't know what is that Danish Norwegian. If a mother coming from Denmark and father from Norway, or they were coming from the same way, but that person has citizenship, which in what are we talking about, let's say 18th century, I don't think the passports has invited before. No, I think passports started using like early 19th centuries. I remember that way. Anyway, so why are we talking about this? It's quite, let's say, unnecessary information. And when you're saying that Exelberg, I can understand that it's coming from Europe. That's totally fine. But what are we talking about their countries, where they're coming from? I think it's some kind of, okay, know your place, where you're coming from. I don't know. If you know, just tell me. Why are they doing this all the time? When someone winning a prize is coming from this country. I don't know. If you know that, please share with me. Many, but not all, in 1817, Goethe had approached Caspar David Friedrich. I like this painting because he has a couple of paintings and he's painting people behind them, and you're not seeing their faces, so you can just imagine actually their faces, which he's leaving space for imagination. That's why I love so much. With a request for a set of illustrations for the German translation of Harwood's essay, but Frederick declined on the grounds that it would undermine the whole foundation of landscape painting, with the artist declaring himself opposed to any attempt to force the free and airy clouds into a rigid order and classification. Clouds for high romantics such as Frederick remained symbols of elemental freedom, although the work of subsequent generations of artists, such as Norwegian Lars Harvottig or the American Frederick Edwin Church, would be further shaped by the natural sciences, with Church making dozens of annotated cloud studies in the preparation for some of his best-known canvases. As with Constable's clouds a generation before, these plein air sketches started off as exercises in rapid execution, done in pursuit of technique rather than transcendence. But as can be seen on every page of this beautifully illustrated book, something about their weightless mutability speaks to our modern sensibilities more directly than many of these painters' more polished studio productions. And though the advent of photography in the late 19th century would reshape the contours of both the artist and the science, especially the more observational sciences such as meteorology, Ruskin's claim made in 1856, still holds beguilingly true. If general and characteristic names were needed for modern landscape art, none better could be invented than the service of clouds. And then later, there is another painting, and I think it's right in that. Yeah, The Valley of the Sea and Sun Clouds by Alfred Sisley. We all know Sisley and his amazing work. That painting is coming. After that, we have seen so many clouds and their types, and everything is starting like this. And I remember we've seen this in high school, something like that, but I just wanted to see all of them. If you want to read this book, it's a classification of clouds by height, like height ranges and everything about them, which is amazingly, beautifully told here. So if you're just curious about it, you can get this book, like I did. And also, I think clouds are not like only the geological, some kind of, let's say, pieces, but I think they're important because I believe everyone did. But when I was a child, I remember I was just looking at the sky and I was looking at the clouds specifically, and I was trying to create the stories about them because they were different shapes, like some of them like rabbits or birds or anything. So that's why I like it. And also, after I noticed, actually my doctor told me I'm allergic to sun, so I just become best friend of clouds. Anyway, so thanks so much for listening. Thanks so much for watching. You can ask me anything. Thank you.